Welcome. I'm Clark Korb, a holistic health practitioner offering some pragmatic insights to help you live a happier, more empowered life and embody your optimum potential. Today, I will be examining the concept of blind spots, how we may identify those areas outside of our typical awareness which may be limiting, detracting from, or even outright sabotaging our ability to fully receive and enjoy what we most desire to extract from our life experience. So, as always, I like to start with some definitions. First, there's the medical definition, which is the area of the retina where the optic nerve is attached, and in that spot, it's insensitive to light. We won't be focusing on that today. One that I'll use a lot by analogy that I think most of us are aware of is when driving. This is an area where your vision is obscured or incomplete in terms of being able to see what's around you. And then there's the common use of a blind spot that's relating to an area of prejudice or ignorance that often results from a willfully unexamined belief system around something. And I'm going to offer my own refined definition that kind of pulls this together and generalizes a little bit. And I would propose that a blind spot is a pattern of thought, which is a belief or behavior that we practice unconsciously that serves to our own detriment or at least to our own disadvantage. And how do you know when you have a blind spot? In other words, if you don't know what you don't know, how do you change that? I think it's a fair statement that we all have blind spots. None of us have complete, perfect perspective on everything all of the time. And I really love the analogy taken from driving a car. We have a large windshield, we have side windows, we have rear view mirrors, and we have side mirrors, all that help us improve the visibility around the car, ideally keeping us safe. And blind spots are well known, and these are those areas which cannot be viewed or from which information is not detected that we're able to derive from those mirrors, the combination of all the mirrors and what we can see out the windows. And most of us have the perspective that if we rely solely on what we see through the windshield and even through our rear view mirror and side mirrors, we may end up having a collision with something that is residing in our blind spot. And a key distinction from this is that the closer the object is to us, the more likely it resides in our blind spot. You can see this in the illustration that I put up here. So in order to check your blind spot or evaluate what's in there, you have to turn your head. This is, in other words, adopting a new perspective or a new point of view to identify hazards that were not previously within your awareness or within your visibility. And it's also possible to improve your visibility and reduce your blind spots by adding additional or improved mirrors. One way to do this is to add one of these convex mirrors that you can stick onto your side mirrors, and this is particularly important to do if you're driving a larger vehicle like a truck. So to move that analogy forward for how we apply it to our daily lives, in order to examine our blind spots, just like we do in the vehicle scenario, we have to first consider the mirrors that we have at our disposal. So what are our life mirrors? One mirror is our general mental and emotional state, taking note of how we feel most of the time. Do we feel clear-minded, or do we feel like we're often in a state of listless brain fog? Do we feel peaceful, or do we feel vengeful? Do we feel happy versus sad, distressed, apathetic? Do we feel like we're living on purpose, or do we feel aimless? Are there some underlying themes that occupy our mental chatter? Are there voices of positivity, of creativity, of excitement, of appreciation, or are there voices of criticism of ourselves or others? Another mirror is our physical state. We can look physically in a mirror and see, is there a general playfulness expressed in our own eyes? What is the general state of health that our skin is reflecting to us? What is our posture like? Is it open and free, or is it more closed off and restricted? Louise Hay wrote a wonderful book called Heal Your Body. She cites in that book that problems in the neck, if there's a stiffness or soreness or a restriction in the neck, it may have a probable cause of refusing to see other sides of a question or exhibiting stubbornness or inflexibility. And the other powerful mirror that we have outside of our mental, emotional, and physical states in our own body is that which we glean from our relationships. So these are interpersonal dynamics, whether they're casual relationships, business relationships, relationships with family, friends, significant others. All of these relationships offer different feedback to us, and it's helpful for us to make note of, is there a common thread that we can detect in how people show up or how they communicate with us? Are we received with love or openness, or is there a sense of distance or distrust in more extreme cases? What kind of feedback do we get from colleagues and family and friends? It's important for us to use discernment in this particular process and avoid heavily weighting someone who might be coming from a place of projection. Is this someone who can offer a relatively objective lens for us getting some feedback on what they notice in our interactions. Is this someone who has an agenda for their dealing with you, whether they're a sycophant or whether they're someone who would be overtly not wanting to address an elephant in the room? Neither of those are particularly helpful forms of feedback. Or is this someone who tends to project from their own unhealed wounds? Again, not the best source of feedback. And a warning with this, so similar to the car analogy, the closer the relationship is to you, the less likely it is to offer you the full clarity, and they may have aspects that reside in your blind spot. So, in other words, first and foremost, we want to make use of all of these wonderful mirrors we have. We want to be checking in with our mental, emotional, and physical states and checking in with our relationships, making the best use that we can out of these mirrors to get feedback. And even doing so, it's important to recognize that there are still blind spots that exist outside of the scope of what these mirrors reflect back to us. In other words, we may still be missing something which is outside the scope of our current awareness that is limiting or reinforcing a limiting behavior. And to look into these potential blind spots, it requires us to look intentionally where we are not customarily focused. This is one reason why some people derive great interpersonal healing regarding relationships when they're single, because they're able to look at themselves from a different vantage point without the reflection of the current mirror at a time, their partner. And it can be much easier to detect a string of, let's say, similar relationships, the same dysfunctional relationship, or similar dynamics that are less than positive that show up time and again with different people, whether it's codependency or walking on eggshells and not speaking your truth or having healthy boundaries, or maybe engaging with partners who suffer from addiction where you practice enabling behavior. Those are just examples. So it's easier to see where those blind spots are oftentimes when you're, again, not directly looking at that mirror. And the closer the relationship is, the more likely you're missing something that's in your blind spot. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have close relationships by any means. It just means that you need to rely on other sources to check your blind spots, just to be clear on that. So, how to detect what is in our blind spots? In general, I'm going to go back to that vehicle analogy. Just like turning your head to check your blind spot, you must be willing to suspend your temporary point of view. In other words, your idea of how things are. And don't worry, glancing into an alternative point of view is not permanent. You're always welcome to readopt and pick up your own point of view should you like it. And checking your blind spot doesn't mean you'll necessarily find a hazard. Just like when driving, there isn't necessarily a vehicle in your blind spot. And in fact, doing this sweeping, this check, may confirm that your current planned direction, whatever that is prudent, just like it would allow you to make a lane change safely when you're driving. But it does require a willing suspension of your own justification for what you believe or how you believe is how it's supposed to be. It really requires a nakedly honest self-evaluation of your current behaviors or thought patterns. And one question I love to use in this regard is, what am I not seeing about this? This being whatever it is that you're examining in a blind spot. What is it that I'm not seeing about this? This really helps prime the subconscious to show you, or at least be receptive to finding answers about it. One exercise that I learned from a great mentor years ago is identifying interpersonal or character blind spots. And this would be analogous to adding one of those convex mirrors to the side mirror of your car. And this was an exercise for determining your essence. And basically, with this, you make a list of around 10 or so individuals whom you know, and you want to ask for an immediate or knee-jerk response that they have to this simple question: what shows up when I do? That question, what shows up when I do? Period. They might say, huh? Or what is that? You don't want them to get in their head about it. You want to get their initial immediate response to what shows up when I do. And you want to get this feedback from people that are trusted, that can be objective and honest with you, that aren't concerned about hurting your feelings. This isn't about trying to make you feel good or boost you up. You're ultimately looking for this blind spot about what it is that you project or bring to the world. And you might find that this is best done with people that are outside your closest circles of influence. Because again, in the car analogy, the closer someone is to your vehicle, if you will, analogously, the more likely they're in their blind spot. They're not going to be showing you something that would be most useful for you to evaluate. So it's okay to ask close friends and family this same question, what shows up when I do? But consider weighting more strongly those relationships that are less close with you, whose perspectives are more likely outside of your blind spot, among the feedback that you're getting from maybe those more close relationships. And the goal of this is, as you assemble the feedback, you kind of get a sense of what is perceived as being your essence, what shows up when you do. So outside of that would be a general practice of how you would examine something that's outside of your point of view in terms of general belief systems. With this exercise, I think it's helpful to identify a core belief that you either feel positively about or resolute in holding. In other words, the best way to invest or to retire or to start a business or to exercise or to conduct a relationship or whatever these things are, you likely have some idea of what the best way is to do that. And then research other people who have demonstrated some success in this same area that you're interested in evaluating, but they've gone about it in a completely different way, or they have an alternative approach or belief about what even defines success in this area. And as always, it's important to use some discernment in qualifying these people from having at least accomplished what they've said they wanted to accomplish, or who embody these qualities that you can recognize they are coming from an authentic place. But it's worth probing a little bit. Listen to some podcasts or reading their books, people that have an alternative view on some of these areas. And when you are combing through this material, evaluate which areas of your own held beliefs might be in contrasted to those presented elsewhere. Doesn't mean you have to change your own beliefs, but consider adjusting your patterns of thought or actions that might improve your outcome. So just like driving a car, if you see another vehicle in your blind spot, you might have to adjust your timing a little bit, either accelerate or brake a bit, maybe take a new direction. Maybe you change to a different lane if you're on a multi-lane highway, or you might recognize that there was no hazard there whatsoever and you were able to continue the course that you were presently on. So in this evaluation, I think it's most important to really embody a spirit of curiosity and playfulness about it. You might discover there's no need to change your current path, so you reinforce your own belief system. You may discover there's some new strategies or perspectives that you weren't aware of that can help you improve the enjoyment or the efficiency of what you're doing, or the effectiveness on whatever trajectory you're currently on. At the very least, you will expand your awareness of others' paths and most likely increase your empathy and or appreciation for what they have to offer. I'm curious to know what exercise or perspective that I've offered here feels most relevant to you, or is something you are curious to try for yourself. Let me know in the comments below. And if you know of anyone who may benefit from what I've shared here, please forward this video to them. If you've found some value in what I've discussed today, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. It's free, it only takes a moment, and it really helps support the growth of the channel. Thank you so much for tuning in.